By now, those of you who pay attention have heard about this train derailment in Ohio. And the idea that a 50-car train derailment would have to have a precursor of by now you've heard it is, well, weird. And that's the story. And I don't want to engage this part of the story by diminishing what's happening to the people in East Palestine, Ohio. This is southeast of Youngstown near the Pennsylvania border. Guys, welcome to the show presented by Americans for Prosperity, americansforprosperity.org, economic liberty, free speech. That's what I'm talking about. I'm going to give you a bit of a timeline, just so you have an idea of what's actually been going on. So this was Friday, February 3rd. And on Friday, 50 of about 150 train cars, it was going from Pennsylvania to Illinois, derailed in the town of East Palestine, Ohio. About 5,000 people along the Ohio-Pennsylvania border, as we described. There was a fire. It was massive. The plumes of smoke. This looks like a horror scene. It looked like a dystopian film come to life. Just brutal. That was February 3rd. The residents within a mile were evacuated. And we found that these cars were carrying something called vinyl chloride, carcinogenic, and these chemicals could have been exposed to the fire. Now, I've got my little cheat sheet right here. Officials put forth a mandatory evacuation. As The Guardian puts it, there are people who refused to evacuate, and they threatened to arrest people because they thought this these multiple cars were going to explode. You had Governor DeWine saying this was a matter of life and death. Now, here we are some 2 weeks later with only now people talking about this story. It took till Monday for the Secretary of Transportation, Pete Buttigieg, to have any comment at all. Now, the story of these chemicals, I bring up the vinyl chloride. That is a chemical that's utilized to make PVC pipe. That's what you use as plumbing pipe. The white, the black, depending on what you're doing, and different pipes for different purposes. That's what it is. In my life, at one time, I had done a fair amount of plumbing work. I've worked with a fair amount of PVC pipe. I wasn't good at it, but I did work with that pipe. There are questions, and there's actually a town hall happening tonight as I do this video in East Palestine to discuss what in the world's going on. Where in the world is the government response? Why is there no one talking about this? And, oh, by the way, is our air safe? Is our water safe? Are we safe living here? Now, I love how The Guardian puts this, they threatened to arrest people. How about the fact that they were told by the EPA that everything's fine? That the air quality is just fine. Oh, we tested it, and it's just fine, and it's just good. As Glenn Beck pointed out in an interview he did on his show, one of the people who lives there had somebody, hey, we're testing the quality. We'll test it for you, but first.
Now, what I can tell you firsthand is that we had a gentleman from CTEC, which is the, so-called independent laboratory. He was sitting in our driveway from the night of the derailment. And we had spoken to him, just very informally. And he said that, and I quote, we follow around the railroad when they make mistakes, and they are happy to have us here. And when, CTEC came to our facility to test our air, they had not offered the services of water at that point in time. They handed me a contract that essentially said that I needed to hold Norfolk, their affiliates, not limited to, but including CTEC, harmless of any future.
You didn't sign it.
In terms of, oh, of course not.
Yeah, good.
But unfortunately, 340 other residents did sign it. Wow. And that's where my heart just breaks for these people, because we don't know the long-term repercussions of what these chemicals can do.
No, we do not know what the long-term repercussions of these chemicals are. The first thing people are doing is saying we're going to hold the rail company harmless. That's one heck of a take. And she was right, and people are right not to sign those kinds of documents. But why in the world would anybody be saying you will hold these groups harmless when the EPA is telling these residents that everything is fine? And when you look at these smoke plumes, you realize there is no possible way that everything is fine. There just isn't a way. Now, I am not a scientist. As Ketanji Brown Jackson, the Supreme Court Justice, reminded me, I'm not a biologist, not a scientist at all. If you ask me, I think there's a problem. I don't live in East Palestine. I live a good distance away. But there are some people here in my beloved Indiana who are wondering, wait, does this affect us? It's the Ohio River. It does border Indiana. Now, it borders Indiana a good hour and a half plus from where I am to where the river is, and you would cross from Indiana into Louisville, at least as I would drive it. Of course, it flows the whole length of the state. But let's leave the science part aside just for a moment. And let's not make the assumption that we know everything there is to know about the science. Let's not be those people. We can make certainly guesstimations about exactly how dangerous this is. This looks dangerous. This sounds dangerous. And if we lived in East Palestine or in any of the surrounding areas, we would be concerned as hell. Let's take a bit of a broader view. Why is there total silence about this? First, let's ask about the environmentalist. I have seen environmentalists lose their mind over everything. They're worried about big oil, so they ruin works of art and glue themselves to walls at museums to get people to stop using oil. We've seen this all over the place. And I believe that if someone takes their hand, puts crazy glue or Gorilla Glue or whatever is on it, and puts it to a wall, we should leave them there. They're basing their entire protest on the idea that somehow they're going to be treated well and then they'll be removed and everything will be fine. No. You glue your hand to a wall, you become the work of art. We should build a little storage cage around you. People can look in and see what you do next. I don't know how you're going to get off the wall. Best of luck. But when you ruin a Van Gogh, chances are I don't worry about you too much. We turn them into the works of art. I've always said this. I truly believe it. Where are they? I have seen people engage in months-long protests about pipelines. They're all out there. They're out there in the freezing cold. They're out there in the blistering heat. They're not in East Palestine? Palestine, sorry. I have seen them block roadways all around the globe. They're not in East Palestine. I have not heard thing one from Greta Thunberg. Not thing one. Why? Does anybody else find that just impossible? It's impossible that there would be no commentary from this group. Why did it take Pete Buttigieg nearly 2 weeks to say something about what happened here? The Secretary of Transportation had time for this.
To work with your contractors, to work with your community colleges on building a workforce that reflects the community. We have heard way too many stories from generations past of infrastructure where you got a neighborhood, often a neighborhood of color, that finally sees the project come to them, but everyone in the hard hats on that project looking like, doing the good paying jobs, don't look like they came from anywhere near the neighborhood.
Right.
You can build community wealth that will help close wealth gaps in this country if we can tear down those barriers. But that happens at the delivery level.
A conversation about racism in construction. This is happening, and this is what Pete Buttigieg is focused on and is talking about. Look, I never put much stock into the idea that the Secretary of Transportation did much of anything, but you can't get Southwest flights going. You can't get supply chain going. You have a train derailment. By the way, we've had over a dozen train derailments, according to Newsweek, in this year alone. What exactly does Pete Buttigieg do? What exactly does he do? Tyler, I couldn't agree more. This is weird beyond belief. And in a world that, or at least in a country that has lost faith so desperately, so dearly in the institutions and in government, why is there government silence about something this visible? It is easier to see this train derailment than it is to see a Chinese spy balloon. Nothing. Zero. The responses from the White House, near nothing. Of course, I mentioned Pete Buttigieg. There is nothing being discussed. How is it? I'm not saying that Senator J.D. Vance hasn't said things, but how is it that senators from Ohio and congresspeople from Ohio aren't raising holy hell every day on every media outlet they can to demand people start acting upon what's happening here? You tell me things are happening on the ground? Well, it doesn't seem like the people there seem like things are happening on the ground. As a matter of fact, the people on the ground are concerned about what happens next, seemingly because they don't have information. This from The Five and Dana Perino.
Dana, so nice job with the EPA guy. What was your read on his level of honesty?
Oh, I didn't think he was being dishonest, but I think that what we found in the morning was like that was in the 10 o'clock hour. In the 9 o'clock hour, we interviewed the congressman from that area, Republican Bill Johnson, and I asked him, are you satisfied with how the Biden administration is doing? And he said, yes, from what I'm hearing on the ground, the federal government is doing what it needs to do. We're getting the resources that we need. I don't know if the problem is at the state level, but what I did feel that the EPA administrator understood but doesn't know how to deal with is the lack of trust from the community about the data. He's saying that the tests are saying that it's fine, but the people actually don't believe that. And the people who are there, as you saw from our reporting, they're saying that they are getting headaches, they're uncomfortable, or they have children that they're afraid to put in the bathtub. I understood that. When I heard that, because you can get bottled water and drink bottled water, I can understand that. That's an expense, but you can do that. But when the woman said she was afraid to bathe her children, that really struck home to me because I don't know how that fear leaves. And then later on in the day, Martha McCallum had an interview with this young woman who said she doesn't necessarily trust the data. And what she's really worried about is she's worked hard, she saved up her money, she bought a home. And now she's afraid that that investment is going to be worthless. And that's really sad.
You can't blame Americans for not believing what the government tells them, Greg, at this point.
Why isn't the government telling them to wear masks? I mean, doesn't this seem a little bit more dangerous? But they're not. They're not. Everything's fine. Why do we have federal government?
Well, I can explain why we have a federal government, and I think that Greg is being a little tongue-in-cheek there. But his commentary about masks is very interesting. Dana's retelling of that story is heartbreaking. Absolutely, positively heartbreaking. But why is it that these people in East Palestine don't trust the EPA or others when they hear that everything's fine? It's because trust is gone. And in a moment where you may very well need the government, the thing that you pay for, that you want to be able to respond to these kinds of things, you don't trust that they're going to be there. As a matter of fact, they're not there. And they're not there not because I say so. They're not there because we don't see any movement at all. They don't believe it on the ground. They don't see enough on the ground. And we don't hear about this story. We don't hear anything about this story. Now, I will even admit myself, I was late to the story because I didn't really see much on it. I didn't see much reporting on it. I didn't find places that I could go to and really get the information. That's all been happening only recently. Only recently we know everything, anything about this train derailment? Doesn't make any sense. It does not make any sense at all. Now, I got asked a question. Did I ever hear what was the cause of this derailment? One of the things that I heard was that they were able to tell that some of the, call them wheels, for lack of a better term, not being an expert on the subject, they could tell that they were overheating to the moment of failure. So that was one of the things that I read about what caused this to happen. But as I said, we've had a multiplicity of train derailments in 2023, over a dozen of them. Now you're getting this wrong, Tyler. He's saying wear masks. It is proven that masks can't prevent COVID or other viruses. How do we trust masks will help anyone? Let's not pretend that we don't understand real life. The idea that a mask doesn't stop something is, of course, madness. There's a reason that those doctors and nurses wear masks in hospitals, wear masks in surgery, other things. Of course, a mask stops something, and of course, a mask can stop certain particulates. They can stop certain things from being inhaled en masse. It's that with COVID, because you're dealing with something with aerosol that is aerosolized, and people don't wear masks in a fitted way, it doesn't work. And we have that data. We have the University of Waterloo studies that's been out for a couple of years that if you have I think a 3 millimeter gap in the mask, the efficacy of the mask goes down to 0.3%. They've done the studies that show when you take a look at all of the studies about masks, little to no effect on COVID, even though the CDC and Dr. Rachel Walensky will still tell you, well, that's because you need to wear the mask all the time. All the time when I sleep, all the time. What in the world do you mean by all the time? Masks don't stop COVID. That doesn't mean that a mask could not be of service to people who are breathing in this toxic air. I'm not saying that it even is, but the idea that no one said, "Hey, wear masks," that's just the weirdest thing in the world, and I think it's a good point. From Greg. People are in fear and people don't have trust. And that's the entirety of the story. Now, that's the story for us. Me in Indianapolis, you wherever you may be. In East Palestine, it's a whole different story. Can't give my kid a bath. I'm afraid to give my kid a bath. That's rough. That is rough. If you didn't think that trust in government could be any lower, here you go. Here you go. And I don't see a way out from this at all. But we should be asking, why is there such radical silence on the subject? Can I go into the full-on conspiracies? The reason that government officials haven't been there to visit is because it is dangerous. The reason Biden hasn't been there to see what's going on and talk to people and reassure them is because it is dangerous. Can it be the reason Secretary Buttigieg isn't talking about it because there's some level of guilt associated either on a government side or on the train side, and the train side has investor groups that may be donors and, we don't want to upset them? I mean, when you say nothing, the vacuum will be filled, and it will be filled with everything. Things that you will consider full-on crackpot theories, it will get filled with. The silence is what creates the issue. It's okay to say we don't know. It's okay to say we're finding out, but you got to at least be talking and sharing. And since you're able to give so many different pieces of data on so many different subjects, when you are silent here, you're telling us a lot. And you are eradicating any little bit of faith that might actually still exist. That's a bigger story. That's a bigger story. I don't have an obvious government response. I have obvious government silence. I don't see any of the environmentalists screaming and yelling about what happens and we have to put an end to chemicals going on rail. Maybe they would do it through a pipeline. Oh, yeah, that's right. You don't want that either. I don't see how this isn't the story for those of us who don't live in East Palestine or the surrounding areas. For everybody else, for the people who live in East Palestine and surrounding areas, I feel awful. I feel terrible. Tell us what we can do. Tell us what we can do, and we'll help in whatever way we possibly can. The lack of faith in government, guys. That's the horror story here. That's the horror story, and it ain't getting fixed. And if this was Trump, when you play that game, if this was Trump, CNN would be 24/7. Why hasn't he done more? Why hasn't Trump done more? Why hasn't the administration done more? They're so incompetent. They're so terrible. They don't care about these people. Is that it? Is that it? It's a town outside of Youngstown, Ohio, and therefore, it's not a constituency that really should get the media all sorts of enraged. Don't tell me it's that. Again, you create silence, crackpot theories come into play, and people will rationalize them. That's what the media did. by not covering the story. That's what the government is doing by not addressing this issue. That's the story. That's what frightens me. Guys, I appreciate the comments quite a bit here. The cover-up is worse than the crime. Ain't that always the way? Chinese spy balloon, Hunter Biden, goes on and on and on and on. The cover-up is always worse than the crime. Guys, glad that you are here. Don't forget to subscribe on Rumble. You see it right here. It's over here, right here. Subscribe on Rumble, and my dear thanks, my many thanks to Americans for Prosperity, AmericansForProsperity.org, economic liberty and free speech. They sponsor this show, and I get to just talk about the things that I think are important. The end of faith in government, really, really important. Guys, I appreciate you. Join me on WIBC, WIBC.com, 6 to 9 a.m. and noon to 3 as the midday show starts getting moved all across Indiana and, yes, across the country, on weekends across the country. It's growing pretty good. Things are all right. I will catch you guys tomorrow, y'all. Take care.